I'm Jen, and this is my presentation on neurofibromatosis. First, we should all get to know a little bit of background information on cell signaling. Cells have the ability to speak to each other, and it's actually very important that they do. Plants, animals, and other eukaryotic organisms with lots of cells must have communication within the cells so that the organism can function properly. Animal cells have things like gap junctions, shown in the picture on the bottom left, that allow molecules to pass in between cells, while plant cells have plasmodesmata, which perform the same function between cell walls. Paracrine signaling, synaptic signaling, and endocrine signaling are systems in certain eukaryotic organisms that will allow cells to communicate with one another to ensure that certain functions are performed. In order for a cell to get information to perform a function, it has to go through a certain process. In the photo on the left, you can see a ligand, or a signaling molecule, going into a receptor on the outside of the cell. This receptor then relays information to proteins inside the cell through the transfer of different proteins until it gets to the nucleus of the cell, in which a response will commence. This way of relaying information is called a signal transduction pathway. In the photo on the right, you can see how the process of phosphorylation, which is the addition of a phosphate group to a protein, is used in a similar process. A ligand or signaling molecule goes into a receptor on the outside of the cell, which then sends proteins to molecules in the cytoplasm. A phosphate group is added to the proteins in each step, therefore changing the protein and making it active. This active protein can now go into the nucleus of the cell and cause a reaction, in this example changing the transcription of genes promoting cell growth and division. Neurofibromatosis and cell signaling. When someone has the disease neurofibromatosis, it's because there's something wrong with how their cells communicate with each other. Shown in this equation at the top of the slide, a normal cell would have a G protein-linked receptor, aka a GPLR. This GPLR would communicate with RAS-regulated kinase pathways, which in turn will communicate with a protein named P53 that will aid in apoptosis or the death of a cell. That is definitely a lot of steps there that can be messed up somewhere along the way. If someone has neurofibromatosis, these interactions cannot happen, and cells that should not be reproducing do. And as you can see from the comic on the bottom of the screen, bad communication, not a good thing. What is neurofibromatosis? Neurofibromatosis, or NF for short, is a genetic disorder that can be hereditary in some cases. This disorder is caused by a mutation on chromosome 17 or 22, depending on the type of NF. NF type 1 affects 1 in 4,000 people, while NF type 2 affects 1 in 40,000 people. NF type 2 is more commonly diagnosed later in a person's life, while NF type 1 can be recognized easily at birth. Both forms of this disorder are different in each person. Some people will have a very mild form of the disease, while others will be constantly struggling with cancerous growths. Neurofibromatosis type 1, or NF1, is caused by mutation on the 17th chromosome. This chromosome is very large, and a section of it codes for a protein called neurofibromin. When coded correctly, this protein performs lots of different functions in the brain, nervous system, and muscles of the body. However, because of the size of the chromosome, sometimes a section can be deleted or read incorrectly, therefore mutating the shape of the neurofibromin protein. When neurofibromin is shaped correctly, as seen in the top picture on the left, it can communicate with other proteins and allow information to properly get into the nucleus of the cell, like relaying to the cell to stop replicating its DNA. Incorrectly shaped neurofibromin, this information cannot be related to the cell, and cancerous or uncontrolled growths can result. It is important to know that neurofibromin is not the only protein that can speed up a deactivation of the RAS pathway, but in neuronal tissue, non-malignant neurofibromas can easily result, as seen on the right-hand side. NF2 is caused by a very similar mutation on the 22nd chromosome. This chromosome codes for the protein myelin or schwannomin. Again, when this chromosome is damaged by deletion or by being read incorrectly, the myelin protein can become disfigured. This picture shows how a normal myelin protein is able to bind to a protein called CD44, which sits in the cell membrane, and stop the growth of a cell. However, this picture shows that a mutated myelin cannot properly bind to CD44, therefore cell growth would become uncontrolled. This is just an easy side-by-side picture of cells without the NF2 mutation looking like normal, regular-sized cells, and with the NF2 mutation looking misshapen and much larger, which is a sign of uncontrolled cell growth. An important thing to know is that myelin is also related to the ARM family of proteins, which link some proteins in the cell membrane to the cytoskeleton, therefore giving the cell its structure. When the myelin protein is misshapen, instead of having a normal shaped cell like the one in the top right, you will get a misshapen cell like the one beneath it. And because the RAS pathways are damaged and cannot properly tell the cell to stop reproducing, you will get more and more misshapen cells that cannot properly function and may become cancerous. Symptoms of NF1 and NF2 can be similar, but there are a few differences. NF1 can be characterized by light brown spots called café au lait spots on the torso along with freckling on the armpit or groin region. Neurofibromas or tumors on the skin, under the skin, or inside the body on internal organs. Lynch nodules on the eye or nerves in the eye. Developmental issues such as communication skills and learning skills being delayed, and bone growth issues. NF2 can have symptoms such as bilateral vestibular schwannomas, which are tumors inside of the brain. Any family history of large amounts of tumors on the skin or inside the body can also be an indicator of neurofibromatosis. I would just like to throw that out there as a PSA. If you're thinking to yourself saying, "Oh my goodness, I have brown spots," don't worry, that does not mean you have neurofibromatosis. Lots of doctors say it can take up to 6 or more large café au lait spots to indicate any type of problem, so don't sweat it. But if you are curious, just go to your doctor. Treatments of neurofibromatosis. NF does not have any type of preventative treatment that will stop tumors from growing, but medications like carbatrol can be used to control seizures caused by bilateral vestibular schwannomas or those tumors in the brain. Cosmetic surgery or plastic surgery can be used to reduce the size of tumors, as seen in the two photos that I have here on the right. The man on top went through a simple cosmetic surgery to remove the tumor above his eye, and the woman on the bottom had a surgery called electrodesiccation, which is a type of cauterizing of the tumor to kill any cancerous or uncontrolled growth in the cells. Emotional support and counseling is offered to people with neurofibromatosis, as well as parental counseling, which is a huge consideration for anyone who has neurofibromatosis or is in a family that has had a history of this disease, and they're considering having children, because it can be a hereditary disease. Some Punnett scores relay that if you do not have NF, but someone in your family does, making you a carrier for this disease, then your child could possibly have a 25% chance of getting NF, while if you do have this disease, your child would have a 50% chance of getting neurofibromatosis. So here's a personal story about Aiden Frazier, a young man living with neurofibromatosis. When Aiden was about 14 months old, his mother, Suzanne, realized that he had a tumor growing on the back of his neck. Wanting to figure out what was happening, she went to multiple doctors, but they brought nothing but disappointment and confusion because they were not communicating with each other. Till eventually they ended up at the Children's Hospital at Montefiore. Dr. Adam Levy was the leading coordinator for Aiden, and he was able to find multiple consultants to form a diagnosis. Dr. Levy figured out that Aiden had NF and that it was progressing very, very quickly. 3 days after his admission to the Children's Hospital at Montefiore, the tumor grew through his spinal cord and he was no longer able to walk. Rick Abbott, the surgeon on the team, was able to begin surgery to pinpoint the problem, which was that Aiden's spinal cord was growing over a deformed spine. This picture on the top right is a picture of Aiden's spinal cord before his surgeries. Action was taken as quickly as possible and the surgery was done to remove the tumor and straighten his spine. Aiden had to go through intensive physical therapy to learn how to walk and function again. But thanks to the surgery and physical therapy, Aiden can now live a normal life, only having to go to the doctor every so often to get chemotherapy and treat the tumor on his neck. Aiden had made tremendous recovery and has posted his success on YouTube. This is Aiden as of his last surgery, which was in 2018. As you can see, he can sit up correctly, and during the interview you could hear that he did have a slight speech impediment, but that he was very intelligent with his words. Thank goodness for physical therapy, and thank you all for watching.